Masechet Kiddushin Daf Gimel. The Mishnah mentioned that there are three ways of performing Kiddushin, Kesef, Shtad, and Bi'ah, and there are two ways of extracting oneself from a marriage, and that is Get and Mitat Baal. So the Gemara wonders, Minyana deresha leme'ote mai, Minyana desefa leme'ote mai. Why did the Mishnah have to say there are three ways and then list the three ways? We can count up to three by ourselves. And why did it have to say, and there are two ways in which a woman acquires back herself? We can count up to two also by ourselves. The assumption is that the Mishnah is not wasting words. It could actually be, it is stylistic and helps to in remembering. Lots of times the Mishnah does mention numbers and lists. So this is a good idea literarily and mnemonically. Nevertheless, the Gemara is asking this question as a way of exploring what is excluded. What are other possible ways we might have thought that one can enter into Kiddushin and leave a marriage that are excluded from the halacha? Minyana dereshel me'ute chupa. The numeration at the beginning is to exclude chupa. Chupa. What does chupa mean? The common usage nowadays, the canopy that is built at a wedding, is one definition of chupa, but actually chupa has many definitions, and we end up doing all of them. It could mean the yichud room. It could mean when the wife is brought into the husband's domain, into his house or a place that he owns or rents. It could be the consummation of the marriage. It could refer to the Sheva Berachot, right? So there's many things that are all constitute chuppah, so we make sure to do all of them. That's the second stage of nisu'in, right? Again, Kiddushin makes a woman exclusively makes her exclusive to that man who does Kiddushin with her, so that no one else can do Kiddushin with her, no one else can take her, no one else can be with her. If she has a child, even after Kiddushin with another man, that child is a mamzer, so it makes her reserved, mikudeshet, right, separated, set aside. But they are not yet actually together, yet married until chuppah, in which when the husband, in Sephardic custom, the talit, right, his talit, and he brings her under his the coverage of the talit, right, under the protection of that clothing. Another form of chuppah. So chuppah, nisuin, is when she actually enters into his domain and becomes his wife, right? That's the second stage. So one might have thought, what if we skip to the end? You skip the kiddushin, skip the ring or whatever, and just do chuppah. Maybe that would accomplish everything all at once. That's why it says three and not more. You cannot jump to chuppah. If you do chuppah without kiddushin, you missed out the kiddushin, and they are not married. Okay, that's one answer. Well, Rav Huna actually disagrees and says a chuppah does work as a kal vachomer that we're going to learn in a couple of dapim from now. And he says, yeah, we could just do chuppah. Chuppah can effectuate kiddushin as well. In that case, what is the enumeration coming to exclude? Leme'ote halipin. Halipin or kinyan sudad is an exchange. We actually do this during the ketubah ceremony generally, in which the husband takes a handkerchief or something of any item, and in exchange, it's a kind of a symbolic exchange. It's kind of a barter, but not of equal items. He takes the handkerchief, and in return, he gives over his obligation to everything that's written in the ketubah. So maybe I would have thought that you can use chalipin, and that's why it says three and only three. But they are not I might have thought, remember, where did we learn that you can use money for kiddushin? From the Gezerah Shava, it says kicha kikach ish isha, meaning marriage, and the acquiring of Abraham of the field of Ephron for Merat HaMachpelah. Now, over there, it does say that he used many kesef, but generally, fields can be bought, can be acquired through chalipin. Right? You give the owner a handkerchief or some item, and in exchange, by him taking it, he gives over the rights to the field. So I might think, since it's connected to a field, so too Kiddushin can be entered with Chalipin. And that's why it says 3 and only 3, not Chalipin. Now we said, actually, you made your Hava. I made a good argument. Why not? You can acquire a field, and fields are compared. So maybe actually it should be that is the halacha. And the answer is no. Chalipin itnu bepachot mishave peruta, visha bepachot mishave peruta la makneya nafsha. Chalipin works even with an item that is worth less than a peruta, right? Even just, I don't know, a small piece of cloth, anything, a lentil. You do chalipin with it, that's okay. As long as it's some item, it can be even worth less than a peruta. However, to acquire a woman, we saw in the Mishnah that this is Bet Hillel says, for kesef has to be at least a peruta, and a woman is not going to give over the rights to marry herself for less than a peruta. It's kind of funny because a peruta is worth about a quarter. So a quarter, right, 30 cents, all right, fine. That she'll give over the rights to marry her and make her prohibited for everybody else in the world and exclusive to you. Yeah, okay, for 30 cents, she'll do that. But for 10 cents, no, she won't do that. Okay, but the point is that this kind of symbolic exchange is not respectful enough for Kiddushin, whereas something, buying something, again, even though it's with money and generally it's not quite property, but nevertheless that type of acquisition is more respectful because at least it has to be worth something, right? You're pointing out that there's value here, even if it's not equal value, it's something, but Chalipin could be even something that has no denomination, so that's too demeaning to use that for Kiddushin. Now, we answered the first question, but what about when it says 2 at the end? There's only 2 ways to leave a marriage, get and mitat haba'al. That's also true to leave Kiddushin, right? Even if there's only Kiddushin and then they change their mind and they don't want to go through and get married, you need a get, or if he dies, that also will be the end of the Kiddushin. So what is that excluding? What other thing might we have thought could work? Lema'ute halisa, to exclude halisa. Sakada dechamina, tete bekavachom mi vama. Ma yivama she'ena yos'a beget, yos'a b'halisa, zo she'yos'a beget, enodin she'yos'a b'halisa, so if a woman whose husband died without children, she now has an obligation to marry, do yibum with the yavam. And that's kind of like she's set up, right? She's set aside. She can't be with anybody else in the world except for the yavam. And then if they do yibum, they're fully married. So how does she extricate herself from that? So with the chalisa ceremony. So I might have thought, I can use that for a kavachomed. A yevama, she cannot get a get. If one of the brothers gives her a get, now it's true, if you give her a get, they cannot do yibum after that, because a get does serve enough that the rabbi said, listen, if you gave a get to the Yevama, then you can't do Yibum. But it actually doesn't permit her to go and marry anybody else. She still has to do Chalitza. So, a get that does not work for Yibum, and yet Chalitza does work for her. So, you see, Chalitza is more powerful than a get. A Chalitza can effectuate release for a Yevama, and a get can't. So that's the given. So this one, who, meaning a regular married woman, who's Mekudeshet or Niset, who does leave with a get, all the more so, Chalitza. We just said Chalitza is more powerful than a get. Chalitza that works for Yevama. Get doesn't. So for a regular woman, get works, all the more so, Chalitza should work. That's what I might have thought. Kamash Malan. That's why the Mishnah says 2 and only 2. Chalisa does not work for to get out of a regular marriage. Now, actually, you brought a good kal vachomer. Actually, it should make sense. Why not use chalitza? Amar kera sefer kiritut, sefer korta, and davar acher korta. It says regarding divorce that he has to give her a scroll of severance that has to be written in a scroll. It has to be a get. It can't be with the shoe and spitting or anything like that. Only a get can release someone from marriage, and a chalitza cannot do so. So really, get works in a place where chalitza doesn't, and chalitza works in a place where get doesn't. So these are 2 separate realms. You can't make a kal vachomer one from the other. And really, that makes sense, because if you think about chalitza, what is the symbol? What is the meaning of taking off the shoe and her spitting in his face. Well, spitting in his face is a way of demeaning him. He, the Yavam, the living brother, has an obligation to uphold the name of the dead. And he is withdrawing from denying that obligation. He's doing something that is shameful in not picking up that responsibility and deserves to be spat at. Whereas that's not true for a regular marriage, that something goes wrong in the marriage, whatever. Maybe he did something or she did something, whatever. But getting a divorce is not something that he deserves to be spat at. He's not fulfilling someone else's obligation. Doesn't make sense. And the taking off the shoe may be related to the fact that by doing Yibum, he now inherits the land of the deceased. He takes control of it, and so taking off one way of acquiring land is by walking around it, like Abraham does in Eretz Yisrael. By taking off his shoe, he's saying, I am not inheriting, I am not taking care of the land, the inheritance, property of my brother, and keeping it there for his name. And so that would be true for Yibum, if that's the symbolism. That's not true for Get, right? Get is not about acquiring land, inheriting land, withdrawing from it. So this has these two realms have nothing to do with each other. They require two different mechanisms because they are two different legal issues. Okay, so that makes sense. That's why for you can only use a get and not halitza for a regular marriage. Now, bekesef. All right, so we solved that while we have the enumeration. Now we go back to the Mishnah and say bekesef. The first way to do Kiddushin is through kesef. Minalan, what is the source? Betu haditnan hav zakah bebito bekidusheha bekesef ishtar ubebi'ah. Minalan demiknaya bekesef ta'avu hu. We have a compound question. Second one is from a Mishnah Ketubot, that a father has certain rights over his daughter when she is young. When she is still kitana, till 12, or even a ne'ara, between 12 and 12 and a half, the father has the rights over her kiddushin. He has a right to marry off the daughter, even against her will. Unfortunately, hopefully the father is nice and will not marry her off to someone that she doesn't like. But the father does have a legal right to marry off his daughter to anyone that he decides, even against her will. And he can do that through kesef, shtad, or bi'ah. Now, if he does it through kesef, then who gets the money? The father gets the money. How do we know that? What's the source? If it's through shtad, also the father would get the shtad. Bi'ah would just be bi'ah. All right, so how do we know that the father would get the money? So how do you know that we can use money at all for any Kiddushin? And how do you know that if it's a minor daughter, that the money goes to the father and he keeps that money? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Damar Kerav Yaseh Achinam En Kesef Ladon Zeh Aval Yesh Kesef Ladon Acher Uman Nihu Av. So actually answering the second question. But by answering the second question, we indirectly answer the first, because if I give you a source for how do we know that a father can marry off his daughter by receiving money, I not only know that he receives the money, I also know that marriage can be done with money in general, right? If she's an adult, then she would get the money. Okay, so we're answering both in one shot. So this is a statement of Rav. It says regarding an ama ivriya. A man is so poor, unfortunately, a father has to sell off his daughter. He has no food to feed her even. So better that she be a slave woman in someone else's house. Ama ivriya, but she'll be treated, of course, well as an ama ivriya. The law is that once she becomes an adult, then the owner has to marry her off to his son, and if not, then she goes free. So it's really only a temporary marriage to take care of her. She'll pay for herself with chores that she does, and there's almost a kind of engagement, an expectation that the household, someone in the household will marry her. If they end up not doing that, she doesn't stay ama. She goes free with no money, right? The no money is paid to the owner. That even though he paid for this ama ivriya, however much he paid for her, he doesn't get any money upon her release, which is different from redemption. That's another way she can go free, is if she is redeemed, but then you would have to pay. But once she becomes an adult, she goes free without payment to that owner. Now, we make a derivation. That owner, meaning the master who owns the Amayvriya, does not get money. But this implies that there is another case of an owner, a so-called owner, that does get money. Who is that? That's the father. A father also owns his daughter, again, not like property ownership, but in terms of responsibility and rights to decide the fate of his child. So once she becomes an adult, and now she is no longer, she can make her own decisions, and the father can no longer force her to marry someone. So then she acquires her own rights. But before that, this Amai Vriya, when she goes free, that father, the master would not get money, but a father who marries off his daughter, and once she's married off, then she's going to be out of the house. He does get money. Right? It's contrasting. The owner doesn't get money, but a father does get money. So that's how we learn it. All right, good. Now, ve'ema ledida. Hold on. This pasuk just said en kasef. It says there's no money. It doesn't say to whom. So maybe it means there's no money to the owner, but there is someone else, another case where someone receives money. Maybe it means she gets the money when her father marries her off, not that the father gets the money. So we say no. Hachi hashta avia mekabel kiddusheha dichtiv et biti natati laish hazeh vihi shakla kaspa. It wouldn't make sense because a pasuk. This is regarding the Mosi Shemra, a guy who the husband says, "Oh, there was no betulim," and the father comes and says, "I gave my daughter to this man," and so on. So the point is, in that specific law and that specific phrase, it says. The father says, I gave my daughter. We see from this that a father has a right to give over his daughter. And how does he do that? Means he is doing the ceremony. He will be receiving the Kiddushin, the money. If they do it with money, he will be receiving the money from the groom. So does it make sense that the father will receive the money and then she, the daughter, will keep it? That doesn't make sense, since it's the father's right, prerogative, to marry off his daughter, and he does the ceremony. It makes sense that he will keep the money. So we know from here that the father will keep the money, and so there is. So putting these all together, there is no money that goes to a master when the Ama Ivriya goes free, but there is money when it's talking about a father, and that money, who will it go to? Well, it's going to go to the one who has the right to marry her off, and that is the father. Now I might think that that's true only if she is under 12, because then a minor under 12 does not have a hand, meaning power or competence, to receive Kiddushin herself. She cannot effectuate monetary transactions, generally. But once she's 12, then that she's already an adult for many laws, and she is now competent to do monetary transactions. So she does have the power to receive her own Kiddushin. So in that case, she should receive it herself. Maybe in that case, she can decide that she is agreeing to do Kiddushin with this guy, and then she would keep the money. So we'll solve the problem for under 12, but what about between 12 and 12 and a half? Now we bring in yet another context. We're bringing in a lot of different contexts here that all talk about relationships between fathers and daughters. This one is regarding hatarat nedarim or hafarat nedarim, that a father while the daughter, and it says bin ureha, so it's talking about a ne'ara, between 12 and 12 and a half, and it says that when she is bin oreha, she is in bet aviha. She's still under her father's control. And so we see that any benefit, anything that she gets benefit from, that she makes money from, any money that she gets, goes to the father, because it says while she is a ne'ara, she is still under bet aviha. So from there we learn that even a ne'ara who gets engaged, the money will go to the father. Right, this statement over here was said and also in the name of Rav. So now we ask, what about something else that Rav said? Minayin shema'aseh habat la'av shene'emar v'chi yimkor ish et bito le'amma ma'ama ma'aseh yadeha le'rabba af bat nameh ma'aseh yadeha le'aviha tepuk le mi bin oreha bet aviha. So now our question is, why we have another statement of Rav, and this statement is redundant because we already would have known it from the previous statement. Okay, what is this next one? It says if a father sells off his daughter as an amma, and so you see it's saying bito le'amma. It's comparing a daughter with an amma ivriya. What's the comparison? Just like an amma, anything that she works for, any money that she makes goes to her master, because she is a slave woman. So too, a daughter, anything that the daughter, chores, work that she does, she makes clothing, whatever, and sells it, the profits go to the father. Now, okay, so we have this derivation. Now we ask, why do we need that derivation? If you already made this derivation here, that bin oreha bet aviha means that any time a girl is a na'ara, and all the more so if she's a ketana, she is under her father's domain. So then I would know that if she's under her father's domain, then any money she makes is going to go to her father. Why would I need yet another pasuk comparing her to an amma ivriya? That's the question. Rather, the way answer out of that, to make it not redundant, is to say, you know what, that pasuk from Bemidbar, Benureha Bet Aviha, is only talking about Hafarat Nedarim. Only for the rights of undoing her vows. That's when she is still considered under her father's house while she's a Na'ara, until she's 12 and a half. It's for that law only. But that's a special law, and we're not going to expand from that law to everywhere else. And that's why Rav needs this, and also needs another derivation that for her salary, right? So you can't learn from Nedarim to her salary. Now, once we know that, well, then we're going to have a problem for our original question as well. Right here also, let's assume that only for Hatfarat Nedarim, she is under her father's authority, but maybe for taking money for the Kiddushin, if she's mikudeshet as a na'ara, maybe the money goes she keeps it and doesn't go to her father. And we can't learn it from that pasuk in Hafarat Nedarim, which is exclusive to Hafarat Nedarim, as we just established. Now, v'chitema nelaf mine, and maybe you'll say, okay, I know that pasuk is talking about hafarat nedarim, but why can't we use it as a paradigm and say, just like in hafarat nedarim, a ne'ara is still under her father's jurisdiction, so we'll learn from that as a paradigm, and also for kiddushin, the money goes to the father. The answer to that would be mamona meisura layalfinan. In general, we don't learn a monetary law from a prohibition. These are two separate categories, and just because there's some limitation regarding a prohibition or some principle that applies in a prohibition, and nidarim are prohibitions, doesn't mean that's going to translate over into monetary law, right? You can't learn one context from another. So that's why now we're stuck. We don't have an answer. And maybe you'll say, you know what, we can learn it from a fine. Now we're bringing yet another whole context. This is about a na'ara who is raped. If that happens, the rapist has to pay a fine. Who receives the fine? The father does. And so maybe we could learn from there. Just like a father receives a fine, so too he will receive kiddushin. Okay, so that would be another answer from which we can learn that even for a na'ara, the father gets the money. But same problem, we also don't learn monetary law from a knas. Now, even though a knas, a fine, has to do with money, still it's a separate realm because, all right, the Torah and the rabbis make kenasot for different things, and sometimes it's related to the actual value of the damage. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes just to make people avoid a certain thing that is common. And so you can't learn general monetary law from a kenas. And so now we're still without a derivation for the fact that a na'ara has to pay a na'ara who is mikudeshet, that the money goes to the father. V'chi tema nelef miboshet upagam. Shane boshet upagam de'avu shayach begavayhu. Now maybe staying within the case of rape, in addition, that rapist who rapes a na'ara me'orasa, not only does he have to pay a fine is kind of an adjustment because now when she gets married, she's not a bitula anymore, so he's paying that difference. He also has to pay for her humiliation, degradation, right? And now who gets the money for that? It's the father. And so maybe we can learn it from there, because that's a monetary law. It's like damages in general, right? If I go damage someone, I have to pay for the different 5 categories. Among them is boshet upagam. So these are monetary damages. So maybe I could learn from there to the case of Kiddushin, and we say no, also no good, because in that case, the father has an interest in them, meaning the father actually has control. He owns the right to degrade his daughter. And again, hopefully a father wouldn't do that. A father loves his daughter, wouldn't want to degrade her. But if he has the legal right, for example, to marry off his daughter to an ugly man, right? And maybe he gets payment from that ugly man's family, right? Listen, we got to pay him off. Or someone despicable, he has boils or something. And so the father has a legal right to marry off and thereby cause humiliation and degradation to his daughter. So that's within the rights of the father. The father owns the rights for his daughter's humiliation. So if she is humiliated by someone else, who would get the money? The father would get it, right? But we can't, that's a special law. You can't learn from there regarding all other monetary things. And so we still don't have a source. Again, we're looking for a source that Kesef Kiddushin goes to the father when the girl is a ne'ara. Ela mistabera techi ka mema'et yesi'ah dechevata ka mema'et. Rather, since we cannot find a source that for a ne'ara the money goes back to the father, we're also going to forget about that source that we had from the Mosi Shemra that says that the for kitana the father has authority and the father would get that money, and we're going to instead derive everything from the original pasuk that we brought regarding Ama Ivriya. We already brought that to say that Kiddushin can be done through Kesef, because we said, En Kesef La'adon Zeh, that type of master does not get money when the Ama Ivriya leaves his house, but there is another type of master where money is effective. Okay, so we learned from there that you can use money for Kiddushin. We still just weren't sure who the money goes to. Does it go to the girl or to the father? And so now we say, you know what? We can learn that also from this pasuk. It makes sense that when the pasuk is excluding another situation, it's saying that the master doesn't get money, but that excludes another case where someone does get money. It's excluding something, a departure that is similar to it. Meaning, just as who doesn't get the money regarding Ama Ivriya? The master. So who should get the money in the opposing, contrasting case? It would be the father, right? That's a departure that's similar. Just like the Ama Ivriya is leaving the master's house, so too when someone gets married, that girl is leaving her father's house. And so it would make sense that the father would get the money. And so that answers all the questions for ketana, for ne'ara, and we don't need any of the other comparisons. Although that was a good tour of lots of other cases of relationships between father and daughter. Now, hold on, these two leavings aren't actually the same. Regarding Ama Ivriya, when she reaches adulthood and goes free, she is free totally from that master. She is not a Ama, she's not a slave at all. She's totally free. Whereas when a father gives off his daughter to Kiddushin, she's still living in his house, right? This is only stage one of marriage, and they didn't do chuppah yet. She didn't yet move in to her husband's house, so she didn't really leave altogether, so it's not really the same. And the answer is, true, even though she's physically still living in her father's house, and for various laws like feeding her, things like that, her father's still going to be responsible for that. It's true, but for a significant type of law, which is the undoing of vows, that already the father loses his exclusive right to undo her vows. As the Mishnah in the Dadim says, Ne'ada me'orasa, when she's Ne'ada and she's already engaged to another man, and she makes a vow, in order to undo that vow, the father can't do it alone. You need the groom to also undo the vow. So you see that for this fundamental law of regarding marriage, see, the father is no longer the sole responsible person that is in charge of his daughter anymore. And so yes, even though physically she's still living at home and the father is still responsible for her financially, nevertheless, for Hafarat Nedarim, that shows she's basically already out of the house, since you need now the future husband to undo her vow. And therefore, this is actually a good comparison, and so that's the final answer. How do we know that kesef, that you can use kesef, and that the kesef will go to the father? In a case where it's a minor or a ne'ara, we learn that from the contrast with ama ivriya, right? For that owner in kasef, but in kasef, but for another case, for a father, he does get the kesef kiddushin. We will continue along this line of reasoning on the next stuff. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.